I stopped for every 2.8 kilometers. So that's for the 28 years that the Berlin Wall stood in Berlin. And then I stopped and took 6 images. So I always took a photo in the direction where I was going, where I was coming from, the left, the right, the sky, and the ground. And afterwards, I combined these images in Photoshop.
Welcome to the show, Gesche.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Of course. You were one of the first people I reached out to at the beginning of this little project that I call the Urbanaut Podcast. And we just couldn't get lined up. And then a year later, we finally get back into contact so that we can have this show. And it couldn't come at a better time because I think you have a book coming out. But I am really excited to finally get you on this show. So thank you so much for coming, and welcome finally to the show.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm glad it finally worked out.
Yeah. It was, I just remember it was just like, oh man, the emails going back and forth. And then when you finally reached out, I was very, very happy. And so it came at a great time. So, but before we kind of jump into your work and what it is that you do, go ahead and take a moment and introduce yourself to the audience.
Okay, so I am a German-American visual artist who's based in New York City. I also teach as a visiting arts professor at NYU Tisch School of the Arts in the Department of Photo and Imaging. And as I said, I'm from Germany. I have a background in urban planning. I studied at the Technical University Dortmund and worked for a few years in community consultation, urban regeneration before moving to London, where I studied at Goldsmith, and I did the MA in photography and urban cultures. And I assisted Hélène Binet, a very well-known architectural photographer, and worked as a research associate at the Center for Urban and Community Studies at Goldsmith, and also as a freelance photographer. And I met my then boyfriend early on and decided to move to the US. He is from the US. So I moved abroad, and I've been living in the US since 2009.
Oh, wow.
In many different
always in New York?
No. We're in Washington, D.C., Cambridge, Massachusetts, New York, and then for 8 years in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, for a year in Berlin, and then back to New York in 22.
Chapel Hill, that's North Carolina, University of North Carolina in Duke.
Right.
Did you teach there?
Well, I did my MA in studio arts, and then I also taught at UNC as a teaching assistant professor for quite a few years.
Oh, wow.
And then it was still during the pandemic that we were on research leave and went to Berlin for a year. And I did a residency at Künstlerhaus Bethanien, among others, where I started working on the project, The Absence and Presence of the Berlin Wall, that I will introduce in a moment.
Was it nice to be back when you went back to Germany?
Oh, yes, it was very nice. It's nice to be back.
That's awesome.
I always feel like when you leave your home country and live somewhere else, you always feel somewhat in between countries.
Yeah.
Between languages. You become a bit a stranger of your own country because, time moves on, right? And when you leave, you have certain, your memories, traditions in mind, but societies change, and so does the German society. And I sometimes also feel I don't fit in anymore because I have lived abroad for so many years and I see many things differently. But it was nice to catch up.
It's that's such a true thing that you were saying there. I was literally having this conversation last night with someone, and they were talking about when you finally move abroad, the language changes you, and then also that place changes, but your hometown changes as well. And so when you come back, you don't recognize it. It almost doesn't feel the same. The people there change and all of that. And so it's probably nice just to speak your native tongue, you know what I mean? But then, it's just the place that you thought was what thought was always going to be there is also changed, and that's an interesting feeling. So, I guess my first question is, I always like to dive into the roots of a person, like how they find their way into like creative endeavors. It sounds like you did architecture initially, correct? Or were you always into photography? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yes, so my grandmother gave me her old camera when I was, I think, something like 12 years old, and I started taking photos mostly of my friends. We went on vacation, so I was always interested in photography. But I was always drawn to the city. I grew up in a small village in northern Germany, and while I really enjoyed the countryside, I was again drawn to the city. And so I decided to study urban planning. And while I studied in Dortmund, I also took up photography. I took photo classes, and then I decided to continue my photo career by moving to London and studying for the MA in photography and urban cultures, and then assisting and working on my own photo projects. And now I'm teaching photography, but still, as you can see later, most of my work is related to architecture and the city, also the landscape. And also when I teach at NYU, I teach analog photography. But I also teach a class that's called Exploring the City Through Visual Arts. And then another class on climate change.
Yeah.
So I try to bring in my interests, the topics I'm working on into the classes I teach.
I think that's quite it's good, to kind of align those interests and be able to teach what it is that you enjoy. And I'm curious to how the what pulls your interest to look at architecture, or at least the city space around you. What inspires you to do that? What's got you thinking about it?
Yeah. So I'm very interested in the urban space, or like how humans interact with space. So
Yeah.
in natural landscapes, but also the urban landscapes, and again how the city or the landscape shapes us. And well, most of my work, as I said, focuses on space and on the traces humans leave behind. So humans don't necessarily appear in my images. It is more recently that I also started taking portraits. But most of my images were about buildings or landscapes.
Yeah.
And
is it's just that human like interference, or like what am I trying to say here? Human what is the word that I'm saying? Intervention into its space that kind of interests you?
Well, yes, it's the intervention that interests me, but I mean, I also have to say, when I photograph landscapes or architecture, I can spend as much time as I want, just focusing on a building or a space, and I don't have to interact with someone and tell them to pose or whatever. So
Yeah,
I quite enjoy that, and I think it's different when you are a portrait photographer. You
very
always have
true.
the human in front of you, So
It's very true.
I always find that a bit challenging, but I mean, I also enjoy it. And as you can see from my most recent project, I also interview people about their experiences.
Yeah.
And that is very much, it derives from my background as an urban planner and visual sociologist, where I am interested in humans' lives. And also from my work when I was working in urban regeneration and community consultation. So some of my works are inspired by just having lived in all these different places, from suburban to urban, and in Germany, the UK, the United States. And wherever I live, I'm drawn to like the local. So my projects are usually very site specific. I'm not somebody who necessarily travels far and takes a few photos and then is done with the project. Most of my projects are long-term projects, and I really try to engage with the local landscape.
That makes a lot of sense, considering you were kind of mentioning how you had lived in all these different places. A lot of times you just hear 2 or 3, but you just kept listing new places, and I was like, wow. and that would inspire a type of investigation of, where are my feet now? What am I seeing? And I can kind of see that being played out in your work now. I'm kind of I'm one of the things that I've noticed is I talk to a lot of part of the name Urbanatica is that urban aspect to you know what I mean? It's that kind of investigation of the space around us. And so one of the things that I've been noticing is this idea of homogenization of the spaces. Do you notice a kind of uniqueness about each place, or a sameness about a place when you kind of do your work?
Well, I mean, I still think every place is unique, but
Of course,
there are elements that seem interchangeable, right? In cities.
yeah.
I mean, I've noticed that especially in the US, all the strip malls look the same, so you don't really know which city you are. And again, also, I find the architecture of single-family homes looks very similar in all these different US cities. But I mean, it's the same like in Germany, for example, in the countryside, right, or in suburbia, the architecture looks the same, and it will probably be very similar in Paris, in London.
It can be, yeah.
In many places, but I mean, still, like, the architecture is still, I think, unique to a country.
Sure, absolutely. Like the high-pitched roofs here in France, it's very.
But then again, also for the commercial buildings, for example, I don't know if I see all these, Starbucks, they look the same everywhere.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't go to Starbucks, but all these international chains, right?
Yeah.
It could be a Starbucks in Paris, a Starbucks in New York. You wouldn't spot the difference.
Yeah, especially when you go inside. There are some times when they're in historic buildings that they kind of take on those particular things, probably because they can't change it. But just because the building won't let them do it. But you're right. It's one thing that I've kind of noticed, especially through my own investigation, my own research, is this kind of homogenization, and I'm not sure if I like it or dislike it. I just notice it, and I've been seeing it in other people's work. There's another gentleman that came to mind. He was saying the same thing about what he was finding in his work. He's an Australian. He came to America, and he was kind of seeing that kind of thing, but it was also not just there, but it was happening in Japan and all the other places that he was going. And I just thought that was kind of a fascinating thing to observe about our time. And so it's you would think, each region would have its own kind of uniqueness, but it's kind of starting to level out, and it's kind of becoming the same. And I don't know if that concerns me or not, but it's just a fascinating thing to observe. And I know I like to ask that of people that spend time looking at the spaces around them and just kind of find their work kind of anchored in that. And so I think it's you had an interesting response there. Now I'm curious. I kind of want to dive a little bit more back into the kind of the origins. You said you had gotten a camera early. It turned into kind of what you decided to study. Now you're teaching photography. Now, were you always kind of interested in art, or was it just kind of photography itself that kind of got your imagination? Talk to me a little bit about that and how you kind of developed in that.
No, I've been interested in art from a young age, and I also have to thank my parents for that, because they took us to museums from an early age, so that we were exposed to art. Not only to museums, but also excavations and churches.
Wow.
So additionally, also my grandmother, she was the vice president of the Kunstverein it's a gallery. We have Kunstvereine in many different cities in Germany. And also again through her, she also exposed me to different art movements and as I pointed out, the camera. And also when I took photos later on, I was interested in lines. And so a lot of my early work is also about architecture and urban spaces. So I moved away from portraying my friends and maybe vacations to we want to photograph architecture and the urban.
That's interesting. Were you always creative?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. I enjoyed art in school very much, and I like drawing, painting, photography.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I find that connection. Sometimes people say they weren't ever, and I've seen two ways, and this is probably why they say science isn't also an art. Some people find it through scientific research. They kind of find their way into photography that way. And the other one is through art. It's through drawing and painting and stuff. Those are the two ways that I've seen. There's of course other ways, but I find that in common. But so now I'm kind of curious about some of your inspirations. Do you have any favorite artists or people that you look at that pull inspiration from?
So my longtime favorites are Bernd and Hilla Becher, the photographers who founded also the Düsseldorf art school, right? With these famous students like Jörg Sasse, Thomas Stoth, Candida Höfer. And especially living in the Ruhrgebiet, in the Ruhr Valley for so long, where they photographed the gasometers, for example, was I always enjoyed seeing the originals. And I think the approach to photographing buildings always from the same distance and with the same lens, the same angle, you can see in several of my projects. Then other artists who have inspired my work are, for example, Anselm Kiefer, and which you may see in some of the images from forests in the Anthropocene. I wasn't thinking about his work when I created mine, but after I saw the results, I was reminded of some of his paintings or mixed media pieces. And other artists who inspire me are, Hélène Binet, who I assisted and I learned a lot through from her, especially also her focus on shadows and light, and her work is very poetic, and also just from what it means to run a studio. So it's also the business side of things. And another artist who I also find draw a lot of inspiration from is Alison Rossiter. She is a US-based artist, and her work is, she doesn't use a camera. She just uses expired paper, and then dips paper in the developer and creates art through camera-less photography.
Yeah. Is it like contact prints? And
no, a lot of the images are just using the chemicals. So like dipping expired paper in developer and then creating landscapes.
Yeah.
And also someone just developing the paper.
I love that stuff. And now you kind of listing off some of those artists, once again, you have your own style. So, but I can kind of see that experimentation, that willingness to think outside of a traditional image, to be willing to break it, which I like that kind of freedom, some people are always looking for that decisive moment, but sometimes you can kind of craft your own, and I like that. Personally, I'm a big fan of that, and I see it in your work. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So, and then also another artist who has always inspired me is William Eggleston. His use of color was very influential for me, especially, I would say, my earlier work, like Go for Gold or The Basement Sanctuaries. And then also I enjoyed like Wolfgang Tillmans, for example, his way of photographing the everyday, as did William Eggleston, but also his way of installing his work.
Yeah, that's a great reference. I often pull that one out. I'm like, oh, I see what you're doing here. It's very Wolfgang Tillmans.
When I go to museums, I often prefer to look at sculpture or paintings.
Do you?
Or mixed media art, which
I do too.
I think it also shows up in my work that many of my images seem painterly, or in regards to the forest in the Anthropocene, they are even become 3D objects.
Where do you think that comes from? Where do you think that comes from for you? Do you feel limited by the frame, or what makes you experiment the way that you do?
Yes, I sometimes feel quite limited by photography, and sometimes it also seems to me that my images look very similar. So I feel I just want to take my images apart or do something new, do something to the surface.
Do you ever feel like you nail it exactly, or does it always feel a little incomplete?
No, I think I nail it at some point, but it's always it's a process, right?
Yeah,
it takes a long time, So when I think about the forest in the Anthropocene, if you want, I can show a few images now.
Yeah, we can jump in and out. I think that's a good idea.
I was looking at the impact of climate change the impacts of climate change on forests in the United States, in particular Massachusetts and North Carolina. And because I was based in North Carolina, and that's where I started the project. Then I did a residency at MoCA, the Massachusetts Museum of Art in sorry, I forgot the location, North Adams. And I was at the same time a visiting researcher at Harvard Forest. So I met with researchers there to learn more about the impacts global warming has on trees. And I also met a forester, Robert Leverett, and his wife, Monica Leverett, who hiked with me through the forest and pointed out all the effects of climate change. And I had also consulted a colleague at UNC. He was a professor of biology, Peter White, and he was really very influential, I would say. And so through talking with him, I figured out 8 impacts of climate change, which is warming, drought, fires, invasive insect pests, sea level rise, saltwater intrusion, storms, and flooding. So then I thought to invoke these impacts through different photographic processes. And in terms of, for example, let me go through here. Where are the photos? Sorry. They come a bit later. And for example, warming. I solarized the prints, and because like warming and drought are related, I then solarized the prints invoking drought and roasted them in a kiln. And while roasting the images in the kiln, as you could see maybe here, the emulsion started to crack, and you can see these holes in the emulsion, and also the emulsion comes off the backing. So I visited places, and again, also researchers from the Southern Forest Research Station in Asheville had me point out locations, or the Robert Leverett, or the researchers from Harvard Forest. And so I took photos of trees affected by, for example, drought. And then I spent weeks and months in the darkroom experimenting. And as you can see here, this is another example of a drought, or this is fire, where I then burned the prints in the kiln. What was very difficult about this process, when I put the prints in the kiln, I had no idea what they would turn out. So I used, also wasted many prints,
when you
which
say
then again is not
kin,
so. Sorry?
when you say kin, is it like an
No,
oven?
kiln, like a ceramic where
Killing.
a kiln,
Gotcha.
KILN, where you
Gotcha.
normally
Yeah.
dry or like fire
Yeah.
ceramics.
Yeah. Wow.
And here again, you can see how the print changes and it turns into a 3D object. I find the surface is very interesting, right? So you can see the image disappears.
Are these like a one? So this is an image of an object. So you're making one of a kind of.
Yes, these are all unique objects, and I mean, I have to photograph them to show them to you, but
Of course. When you did you ever put these on display? Did you show these in a show?
Yes, I can show you. I think I have an installation image. No, where is it?
So people get to be confronted by this object.
Yes, I
Gotcha.
must have I used to have an installation image on the website. I had a show with my gallery, Tracy Morgan Gallery in Asheville in 2021, just before we went to Berlin for the year.
Wow.
And then again, this is in a print invoking storms, where I solarized the print and then I ripped it, and I photographed forests that were flooded. And then for this one, I used a mirror to basically, I first made a gelatin silver print and then I mirrored it and re-photographed it so that it looks like sea level rise. And for saw border intrusion, I used salt from the Atlantic, North Carolina Atlantic, and put the salt on the prints while developing the image.
Wow.
And maybe I can show you this one. And I mean, this happens when you work through your ideas. I had mistakenly processed a roll of color film as black and white. I hadn't paid attention, and that's where we get this brown sepia, or the sepia tone from, right? And it looks like brown leaves, or in these trees were infested by the emerald ash borer. And then I engraved the burrowing pattern of the emerald ash borer with a laser cutter onto the print on here.
At least it came out. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You're getting good contrast on it. I'm gonna ask this.
Let me go back to.
Yeah, of course. There's I can't help.
Should I stop sharing, maybe?
No, leave it up. We're gonna talk through it. I can't help but notice the intervention into the process.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of listed them off as if there were like certain things you were trying to incorporate. Why was it so important to communicate those, and what was your aim in that intervention? What were you hoping to convey?
Well, so when I spoke with researchers and I showed them my first trials, they said, "Oh wow, this looks like," for example, I think I showed them images of, for example, the prints are not on my website. Some of the first ones, but they said, through this process, I can show viewers what scientific data can't convey, because most people are more inclined to look at an image than read through an essay or like an academic paper, or look at graphs or data.
It's very true.
And they said, like, for example, here, some of these basically holes in the emulsion, they look like the stomata of leaves. And also when a leaf is dry, right, it gets wrinkled up and it shrinks. And so that's also what you can see here, the edges of the paper.
Wow. They're evocative. They are this looks like a lung, actually. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of has this kind of interesting feeling. I just can't get over the intervention itself, and how you made that connection is really quite interesting. And I bet that is difficult. I've been to Chapel Hill a few times, and it is absolutely stunning, that forest there, and the houses, and the but there's also, you can tell there is this kind of effect that because of a changing climate, and so you to try to convey that must have been difficult. And I feel like you've done a really good job of doing that. I love your explanation of it. Was it fun for you to kind of push the edges of it? And on the back end of that, did you find that some of these experiments didn't really work? Can you talk me through that?
Sure. So I could also say a lot of most of my work is research based. So I spend a lot of time digging for information. And as I said, I interviewed researchers. I hiked with a forester. So that also informs my process. And for example, for flooding, here. I tried also cyanotypes, and they didn't look so good. I'm still not 100% satisfied with this one to represent flooding. So this is something I may revisit. And for this one, I also thought of maybe to use a salt paper print process. But again, other artists have already used this process for visualizing a saltwater intrusion. So I felt I couldn't do the same.
Sure. It's interesting, I like that idea that you're kind of pushing what an image can be, but also trying to convey something that is kind of, believe it or not, an academic paper is not abstract. It's actually clear descriptions of data, right? However, for some people that don't have that kind of vocabulary in that language, it can be somewhat abstract.
Mm-hmm.
That actually mean. And I think your effort to kind of interpret that through your work is quite interesting. Did you enjoy the process of this?
Oh, I very much enjoyed the process of this.
Yeah.
I mean, it was frustrating at times because I felt, well, I wasn't getting anywhere, but then at some point there's a breakthrough, and then you continue.
Yeah.
But I think that happens to everybody, right? You start with an idea, and then you have to take turns, and at the end you have a finished project that you can present.
Wow. That's interesting. I've never seen the forest in this way. I haven't seen it. But that's great. So you also have some other projects that you wanted to show us as well. I think you definitely wanted to show us that first one there, the absence and presence of the Berlin Wall. Are these at all connected? It sounds like research is the connecting thing that pulls you. Talk to me a little bit about what led you into that project.
Yes. So for many years, I had worked on a project called Oppressive Architecture, where I was looking at the relationship between architecture, how architecture is used to oppress people, right? And or like systems, certain political systems build architectural structures to oppress people. So I was looking, also because I'm German and I've always been interested in the history of World War II and the Holocaust. I visited concentration and labor death camps and photographed the architecture. And I did the same because I was living in the South, and also because my husband is African American. So I wanted to explore the history of both of our families. I was looking at architecture of formerly enslaved people's homes. And in my work, I also often like to explore hidden places. And most people are not, but maybe I can just show this right now while we're talking about it. Let me see. Wait, it's not getting smaller. Let me see. I can show you the ones I started with. So these, I don't know how familiar everybody is with the plantations, but there are many in North Carolina, and there's normally the big house, and then there are the buildings of enslaved people either very close by the house or a bit further away. And in most cases, the buildings of the big houses can still standing, and they can often be rented for weddings or other festivities, which I just find unbelievable that this is possible. And anyway, so I decided to rather focus on the architecture, or on the slave dwellings. And again, I had learned about where is he? Sorry. Joseph McGill, who runs the Slave Dwelling Project, and he envisions a more truthful and inclusive narrative of history. And his goal is to stay overnight in every still existing slave dwelling in the United States, because he wants to preserve the dwellings and educate the public. So he had a blog, and I was able to find out where some of these dwellings are located. And I got in touch with John Williams. He was a principal in a outside Greensboro, and he connected me, for example, with the owner of this building. And what I did here was I photographed the buildings during or after sunset, and I used strobes to illuminate the building, and then afterwards I post-produced the images in Photoshop. So these are some of the earliest buildings I photographed, and they are normally somewhere far away in the countryside, so it took an hour and a half even to get to these places. One of the most well-known places is maybe Stagwell Plantation outside Durham. And so I have some of these here.
So why are they inverted? Why did you move
on? At the beginning, I shot on color negatives, and I found that they still looked too beautiful. And then again, it was just by accident, I inverted the image. I think I had turned the black and white already, and then I took color and black and white image negatives. And then by mistake, I had inverted them, and then I thought, oh wow, this looks more like what I want to present. They look like architectural blueprints.
Yeah,
they feel a bit ghost-like because I find it's an aspect of history that is not talked about, and I mean, especially nowadays, we may have heard about the politics here. You're not allowed to teach about slavery anymore. And in 2023, I was commissioned by the Brownsburg Museum in Virginia to photograph the remaining dwellings in their small town.
So I'm noticing something here too. It's are you removing the background?
Well, so when I took the first images, again this one, because of how I illuminate the building, and then when I use the strobes, and I mean it's dark, the background disappears.
Yeah, naturally
it
does.
Pitch black. Yeah. And in some cases, like for example with this building, what used to be the big house is right behind it. So in some cases, I have to remove parts of it, and there was a big magnolia tree here. So I had decided early on that I would only focus on the building. And so also here there was a bush that I removed. Another one here.
Yeah, there's something really very strong about including the vegetation in there and then cutting out the frame of that. It's like you put the structure center stage, but there's something about the plant that makes it really strong. I can't put a finger on it. Dude, what about you? What do you think about it, including the...
Oh, I mean, I think that even makes it even more ghostly, right?
Yeah. Is that kind of what... Yeah, maybe that's what I'm noticing. There's just something about having the vegetation included in the frame and then the structure, like they can't be separated. And it's that's interesting. It's quite interesting. Very quite interesting. Yeah, proceed as if, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, so my son assisted me on this photo shoot, and but I think it's also again, but interesting or sad. My husband's ancestors were arrived in somewhere in Virginia. His family can't trace back where, but I mean, just to imagine that perhaps his ancestors had to labor on any of these plantations.
Yeah.
It's also very, moving.
Yeah, for sure.
And then this one. And they're now and they're still being exhibited at the Brownsburg Museum. So this is a very small museum run by the community, and they also involved talk to the local African American community and their ancestors. So I think it is a very good, I think, collaboration.
Is there anything that in this particular project that you discovered that surprised you?
Well, I think what I really appreciate that everybody who owns these properties nowadays wants to make sure they stay intact to remind of the history so that we don't forget. And while working on this project, I saw the big difference between how the US deals with its history and how Germany addresses its history.
What do you mean?
Well, I think especially in terms of remembrance, right? In Germany, there are all these concentration camps that are basically historic properties. School classes visit concentration camps to learn about the Holocaust. It is, hopefully some widely taught in schools. Whereas I found that it's not necessarily the case here in the US.
So this preservation is actually serving as as kind of a way of not forgetting, but also in a way of kind of creating a way of remembering what not to do.
Yes.
Yes, got you. That's interesting. Do you feel that this project and because we started off, I guess the first question was related to the Berlin Wall project. Do you feel like those two are connected?
Well, so let me quickly jump over to this one. A small study of concentration camp architecture. So I photographed former prisoners' barracks. And I think that is where what also reminds of the Bechers from the same distance, the same gray sky. And which allows you really to compare the architecture, right?
Yeah.
And what I thought stood out to me that, for example, this is the Ravensbrück Memorial Museum. So that was the new laundry or the so-called disinfection department. The structure looks very similar to the prison in Sachsenhausen. Or these barracks here in Sachsenhausen, infirmary barracks, look somewhat similar to, again, these barracks in Auschwitz.
Wow.
or in Stalag XB in Sandbostel. So by looking at history, the history of World War II and the Holocaust, which I think it's also still very present in Berlin, and you can see all these layers of history. And as we all know, after Germany lost World War II and Germany was divided into out by the Allies, right? So France, the US, and and England, Great Britain occupied certain territories, and the Soviet Union, or like the West, and then the Soviet Union, East Germany, and same like Berlin was divided into the different sectors. And let me stop sharing here. And so, I mean, I've always also been interested in history, and I have visited Berlin many times since I was a teenager. I even stood in front of the Berlin Wall once as a child, so that left a lasting impression on me. And whenever I was in Berlin, I think you can really feel history and the different layers of history. And I mean, World War II and the Berlin Wall are directly connected, right?
Yeah, of course.
So I've always wanted to work on a project about the Berlin Wall and also German reunification. And again, also when the Berlin Wall fell, it was like one of the most memorable days of my life. And
Wow.
so we have planned this research leave, and I had the invitation to be an artist in residence at Künstlerhaus Bethanien, but I had to come up with my own funding because normally they work with different countries in their institutions, like the Arts Council in Taiwan, or there is Blue Star Contemporary in Texas, for example, but only artists from Texas can come, but they're not working with any other organization in the US. So I had to come up with my own funding, and I submitted a research proposal to the German Academic Exchange Service, which was accepted. And so they provided some of the funding, and then I also received funding from the Bundesstiftung Aufarbeitung. That is I get it. It's a very long name in English. I think the Federal Foundation for the Study of the Communist Dictatorship in Eastern Germany.
Well, that is a long name. Yeah.
Germany.
It's a sentence.
So when I came to Berlin to start the residency, So the idea of my project was to look at spaces where the Berlin Wall is still present, and also look at spaces where the Berlin Wall is absent and where nature has taken over or the city is growing together. And then third, where if the mental construct of the wall continues to persist. So I was really interested, in exploring the current state of German reunification, and I did this through the three different approaches. The first one was I cycled along the Berlin Wall Trail, which follows the former German Democratic Republics, the border control path, and also the West Berlin Customs Pass. So it extends about 160 kilometers around former West Berlin. And I stopped for every 2.8 kilometers. So that's for the 28 years that the Berlin Wall stood in Berlin. And then I stopped and took 6 images. So I always took a photo in the direction where I was going, where I was coming from, the left, the right, the sky, and the ground. And afterwards, I combined these images in Photoshop, and then you can see these composite images. I have 61 images in total. And I mean, also this was a process because I first had these 6 images from each location, and you can see what trees, buildings, the path. But I thought it just looked too boring, and at some point I had the idea that I could layer them in Photoshop, also to show the layers of history that we encounter in Berlin. And here and there you can see what is the word? References to the Berlin Wall. For example, here it says Berliner Mauerweg, that is the Berlin Wall Trail. And over here you can see very faintly the double cobblestone row that you can see in the urban part of where the Berlin Wall used to stand. And about a third of the Berlin Wall was in the city, and 2/3 were in suburbia or the countryside. So we can see that about 2/3 of the images are very green.
Yeah.
And so there are many more. It was just easier for me to open up the layout from the book. So there will be many more in between. I can show you a few more, and then we head back into the urban areas.
Wow.
And as you can see here, very few people appear in the images. You may see somebody here in the tram, or you saw someone here on their bike, and there's actually a person standing here. So this was one approach. This is the last image. So I decided it wasn't 2.8 kilometers between this one and this one, but I thought because I started my journey at the Brandenburg gate, I also wanted to end there. And this is really the only image where you can see lots of people.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's quite there's some that are just very, like that yellow one that shows the tram.
Oh yeah.
I think that one is very, very strong. I love the color contrast in it, but then also the details that pop out that seem almost foreign. It almost seems like a refraction in glass, where you're getting multiple images on top of each other. When you see refraction in glass, it gives me that kind of a feeling. It's quite interesting. Now, when you did this project, it was remind me of the year.
So I did my first tour in the fall of 21, and then I did a second tour in the spring of 22, and these are all the spring images.
So it's what, 30 years later?
That was 33, right? No, 22 was 32, yes.
Yeah, it's right in there. Yeah. Now,
No, 23 wait. This year it's 25.
Yeah, I'm doing the math backwards. Yeah, I'm an artist, not a math guy.
Yeah, 33. The Berlin Wall fell in 89, and so
that's right. Yeah,
33 years after the Berlin Wall fell, or 31 years after German reunification. But maybe I can quickly add. So this conceptual approach enabled me. I forced myself to stop in locations where I would normally not take any photos. Right? Wow. Because I had purchased what you call it, that to count the kilometers on your bike. What you call the thing?
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about, but I have no idea what it's called.
Anyway, so I bought this, and I mean every 2 point
a thing. Yeah.
Yes, I stopped, and I mean, because I could have taken many photos in the city, but in the countryside, it would have maybe been more difficult, or in the woods. So anyway, I stopped every 2.8 kilometers, and these images give me the opportunity really to evaluate how does German reunification occur in these places.
So I'm curious. It's years later. Is there still a presence of that wall? Is it still feel very much? Once again, I've never been, so I'm speaking from ignorance here. So, does it still have that kind of aura about it? That it was there, or do you feel like this idea of reunification has been successful? Talk to me a little bit about that. What did you find as you did this project?
So there are very few locations where the actual wall still exists. However, this path was part of the burden of the border fortifications, right? So we don't see the wall, but we still see this was part of the death strip.
Gotcha.
And so the path is really the connecting element in all of my images. So it does connect to the border and to the Berlin Wall, and it is absent, but it's still present. And what we can't see in these images, which again, there are the memorial sites, like the Berlin Wall Memorial, which shows an original piece of the Berlin Wall. It's the biggest preserved piece of the wall, the death strip, and then also the wall facing the east. So I guess, well, it would be good to show you now the setup of the border fortifications, because the images that we see of the wall, they were normally taken from the western side, or West Berlin.
Yeah.
Then came the death strip, and then came the so-called Hinterlandmauer. So there was also a lower wall in East Berlin, or in Brandenburg, or fences. But what I enjoyed, that all the communities along the wall trail had set up little info boxes where you could read about the history, or they showed images. And so I felt while cycling along there, the wall was still present.
Yeah.
But I also very much enjoyed, well, just being immersed in nature and seeing how, well, former West Berlin and Brandenburg, and also former East Berlin, are really growing together, and how many people enjoy the outdoors. This is in Potsdam, for example.
Oh, wow. Some of these nature ones are quite beautiful. Was that what you were going for?
Well, I mean,
I know some people think that's a bad word.
no, but I mean, I think the images, you have to be drawn to the images, right?
Absolutely.
So they have to
I agree with that.
be
Yeah.
beautiful, because otherwise you wouldn't look at them.
Yeah. Some of them, like the other one with the blooms on the tree, that is quite strong. And then the path that takes your eye right into the center. I guess that's a path there. Is that the wall?
Path, and then there are these markers that remind of people who were killed when they tried to escape.
Wow. But yet it has this glow. It's just, and this one is really quite strong too. It's the one with the chateau, or the house.
Yeah, but I mean, I was also very lucky that I stopped right here, and that I could witness the cherry blossom. Just a few days, I had the cherries had dropped their blossoms, and it looked just green. And same as this, that's rape. Is it rapsöl, the canola, where you get
Okay.
canola from?
Yeah. Is it called canola? Is it? I know
Is
it's a
it
seed.
is it rapeseed?
It might be. Once again, it's not my expertise, but
Right.
but I know what you're saying.
In German, it's Raps.
Okay.
And
Wow. Okay.
right.
There's just something about I really enjoy. Is that a fence?
This here is a fence from this property, the service station, and then you can see the bridge
Wow.
and the house here.
Okay. It's like double exposures or multiple exposure images. It's quite interesting, and I think the path you're taking us on, no pun intended, is a great way to kind of connect that particular process into what it is that you're doing. It's almost like you're giving us a 360-degree view in one image.
Mm-hmm.
And it almost feels like a metaphor. Is it a metaphor for something?
The 360-degree view?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, that's basically what I was trying to achieve. I first had imagined like to put all these 6 images in a box so that you would look through into the box and had a 360-degree view, more or less. I mean, not, but I thought that was too simple, and I think this invites the viewer to interpret really what is happening in the image.
Yeah, it makes you look deeper to see what you can find. Right. This is a little bit more difficult because the green comes together, but you still can, which makes it quite successful. Mm-hmm. So it's very interesting.
There's one more. So in some respect, the green images were easier to composite than the city images because there's so much going on in the city space, right? And then also when you put layers on top of each other, the colors sometimes shift, and then be saturated, especially like when there's these brown tones were difficult to deal with. So let me just move on. Sorry?
I just have one question for you. Like I'm seeing a kind of a connection here between those 3 projects. And what do you think the connection is there for you? What do you, from those 3, if you were to point to those 3, what would that connection be?
Well, I think all of them have some, a kind of conceptual approach and are experimental.
Outside of the approach, more research. I'm curious.
Oh, research. It is. I'm not just. I'm not. Well, they already with history, and I'm not just walking around and taking an image. I'm guided by history and by concept.
Yeah. Questions about what has been. Does it, a lot of these are almost kinds of histories that people would wish to forget, and just move on. And it feels like I'm seeing a connection to where you're contemplating these histories and you're rethinking about them, and conceptualizing them into a body of work. And I think it's interesting to even just think about it. Even with the climate change project itself, people don't want to think about that either. Yeah. And it's just something that we would rather just, just ignore and just move on from. It's like, okay, thanks. And do you feel like in some ways you are, I don't know, trying to conceptualize them to keep them front of mind for people, or maybe even for yourself? It's just something you're thinking about, and I'm curious about that connection for you from a subject matter perspective, I guess.
Well, I mean, I'm definitely interested in working on topics that are uncomfortable and that I want to remind people of, make sure they don't forget. But I guess it's not always very easy because not everybody wants to be reminded of these topics, right? Or atrocities.
Yeah.
And we also have to say probably some of it I would have never seen if I had not moved around. And I mean, I'm also looking at Germany with a very different perspective now because I'm becoming more of an outsider. I used to be an insider, now I'm an outsider. And same in the US. I guess I'm on my way to become more of an insider, but I'm not from here. So I think this perspective also helps me to make connections and helps me to present work that other people would not just think of, not conceive.
It's quite interesting, and it takes a kind of awareness and strength to kind of do that kind of thing. And I was just curious where it came from and where the curiosity came from, because most people pick the easy path, and you're kind of going into some subjects that some people wouldn't want to, and I think there's something very admirable about that. So that's why I was kind of trying to get to the root of it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, when I grew up, I was always wondering how the Holocaust could happen.
Oh yeah.
Right, and so I really
how could people do that to each other?
How could people do that? And so I wanted to find out about it, and I think that's why I started working on the oppressive architecture project. And I have another project, What Remains of the Day: Memories of World War II, where I photograph spaces where Nazi atrocities were carried out, and I overexpose them by 1 second for every year that since World War II has ended. But you will see, I mean, the images look like they are fading, same as our memory. And I also interviewed Holocaust survivors, but also Germans, because I wanted to find out how this could happen. And but unfortunately, I think what's happening in the US right now, and maybe also in Germany again, I don't know if it's a repetition of history, which I'm very shocked about, because I fear we're sliding into fascism here.
It's there's this old proverb, and I don't think it's Chinese, but it says, "May you not live in interesting times," or whatever. And I guess the more normal times are, the better it is. And we are definitely living in interesting times. It's hard to say what all of this is coming to, but there's definitely some kind of an awakening happening on multiple levels, and I don't know what that is. And it's quite interesting, especially as an American in Paris. I get to see a little bit of it here too, and it's interesting. I think go ahead.
Just you go.
Yeah, well, I guess what I was trying to say is I think, history is very important. Being aware of it so that you don't repeat it is super important. I think the very fact that you make that the center of your research is quite interesting. And the way you're able to conceptualize that into art is also quite interesting. By no means do I feel like you were done. I feel like you just have more in you. You're gonna just
I have made
continue to pull this stuff
I know.
up and look at it. So like, I definitely want to encourage you. But it's definitely it can put you. It's kind of scary too. Does kind of looking into these subjects, does that kind of have an effect on you at all?
Oh, I mean, it is very heavy at times also to
I can
visit
imagine.
these locations, right? I mean,
Yeah.
but I also feel like I have the privilege of being able to leave again, right?
Yeah.
I can visit these places and leave, whereas many other people had no choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely interesting. But let's take a look at that next. You were pulling something else for us, right?
Right. I wanted to show you go back to the absence and presence of the Berlin Wall. So I have shown you the composite images, and as a second element of my project, I received images from the Stasi records archive, so the secret state police. And I think I mentioned it earlier, but the images we normally see of the Berlin Wall are always taken from West Berlin, because East Germans were not allowed to photograph the wall or even come close to it. So only very few images exist, and people are risking their lives to take these photos, or they could be imprisoned for it. And again, so I received 134 panorama images from the Stasi records archive, and I removed the Berlin Wall and the death strip. Sorry, it keeps shifting here. And then I reassembled the images and to create new landscapes of Berlin without the Berlin Wall. And here's the second one. And
I can see your attention to lines. I can see it. Yeah, you definitely have that still.
I do.
Yeah, it's showing up for sure. And they're placed very well in there.
Thank
It's
you.
almost it's almost surreal in a way.
I mean, I'm only showing 2 out of 23 collages today. But I was either for a few collages, they were all taken at the same location. So I made a collage from that location. Here I was interested in shapes and shape, form, and or location. So I can go back to this one here.
Yeah.
And then, and again, this adds a historical perspective to the project. And what is also very important to me, because I did not grow up in Berlin, never lived there for more than a year. Or so, wait, that's the wrong one, right? Yes. I also interviewed 28 Berlin residents about their experience with the Berlin Wall and also German reunification. And among these 28 people were a former guest workers, and who I think are always left out of the conversation when we talk about German reunification, same as the contract workers. So because of a labor shortage, guest workers were hired from mostly Southern Europe to work in either in West Germany or in West Berlin, and contract workers were hired from the GDR, from other communist countries, for example Vietnam or Cuba, to work there. I excluded a few images here from the archive. So I portrayed everybody except for 3 people who didn't want to be photographed. And then I summarized the interview. And I would talk about the book again later, but the book will be published by The Stunts. It's a really great art book publisher based in Berlin. The book will be published this summer in a German and an English edition. Because the book contains so much text, we decided the languages have to be separated. Otherwise, it's already 304 pages long. So imagine what it would look like with also English text in the German edition. So I think it would reach 500 pages, which is too much. And then I also interviewed former political prisoners. For example, Peter Kolb tried to escape from the GDR. He wanted to swim through the Danube River and then make his way to West Germany, but he was caught and imprisoned for, I think, at least a year and a half. And then he was bought free by West Germany, and he moved to Essen, where his grandparents lived.
Wow.
And then this is Sevim Çelebi-Göçlich. She is from Turkey and moved to Berlin when she was 16 to work as a guest worker at the Siemens. And then she studied for her Abitur, that is like the high school diploma, because her degree from Turkey wasn't recognized in Germany. And then she studied politics and social work, and she was the first immigrant to run for it's called the Alternative Liste, a party in Berlin. So she was the first immigrant in the Berlin city parliament.
Oh, wow.
And she initiated so many projects to support immigrants. But her life was made very difficult by the Germans. Mm. And again, this is another political prisoner. He tried to flee twice and was imprisoned, and then he moved to West Berlin. And then this is another lady who came to my exhibition, because I also interviewed people at my exhibition. She's a artist and curator and works with young adults. Again, here I removed the image from the archive. And I photographed the people in a location that was meaningful to them. So, for example, this prison reminded him of the prison he was incarcerated in, but that prison does no longer exist. Or he, for example, was interviewed in Charlottenburg, with the castle, the park of what do you call it? Not Royal Gardens. Because this was very meaningful to him. Or, for example, Hassan Tukulca, he was one of the first immigrants to receive the cab driver license. Mm-hmm. And through his driving school teacher, he learned a lot about the Berlin Wall and all the different locations. So I photographed him in front of the Berlin map. So
you say you don't take that many portraits.
No, these
are great.
Thanks. So this is the second time basically that I'm taking portraits. So the first time
they're good. Yeah.
What Remains of the Day, and then this time the second time.
I think they look great. They're different. They're not all the same. It's like they capture a personality, especially accompanied with the text. That's I think it's I think you did well with that. So is this the book that you're raising money for?
Yes. So let me show you this preview.
Yeah.
Sorry. So all these different windows open here. So I am running a fundraising campaign to raise money for the book production and also to pay my team, because we all love photo books, but we all know how expensive it is to print a photo book.
Yeah.
And I had to hire a graphic designer, a translator, and then somebody who does the copy editing. And I have received smaller grants from like NYU or the Puffin Foundation, for example, or also some private donations. But I still have to raise money. So I will run a campaign on Kickstarter, and those of you who are interested can pre-purchase the book. So you can either purchase the English or the German edition. This is the cover of the English edition, and where does it? So the book costs 44 euros, 42 pounds, or $55. So during the fundraising campaign, it will definitely be, I only charge 44 euros for a book. So it will be cheaper to buy the English version then. And then we want to start printing in late May so that the book can be released in July. And my goal is to also show the book in Arles at the Rencontre d'Arles, right? That's how you pronounce it. And then we also want to launch the book in Berlin, Künstlerhaus Bethanien this summer. And I'm organizing event here in the fall in October for German reunification.
I think it's really cool.
I should say, so the event will take place at Deutsches Haus at NYU in October, but
okay,
details to follow.
So on the Kickstarter campaign, how long are you going to run it? How long until its release?
No, I will run the campaign for about a month.
Okay. Is there a certain number of like books that you can buy, and then once it's done, or is it just going to run for 30 days?
No, we'll run for 30 days. You can buy as many books as you want.
You're like, please.
Yeah. And again, it's cheaper to buy the English version now than it will be in the future. And you can also buy small prints or postcard if you're just interested in that. Or people can also just make a donation if they want to support the project.
Sure. So with the book, what do you hope people get out of it? If I were to buy this book, you put in a lot of work in order to put it together. What are you hoping people get out of it?
Well, I think I'm trying to offer a different perspective on reunification. I mean, I know things are not going well. We all have heard about the election results, so that the AfD, the right-wing party, gains a lot of traction, but also that the government is moving more to the right, I think. And also the media, I think, only reports about reunification one-sidedly. I have interviewed many people who have never been asked about their opinion about or their memories of the Berlin Wall and reunification. So I hope that I'm offering a broad perspective. And I also interviewed half of the interviewees are from the former GDR, and half of them are from either the former West former like West Germany, West Berlin, from Turkey, and I also interviewed 3 people who have American roots because I wanted to make the connection to America. So they have lived in Berlin for a long time and moved back. It's one person, or they live in Berlin and another place, or an American who has also moved to Berlin.
Interesting.
So I just want to show a spectrum. And again, through these different approaches of the layered images, the interviews, and the collages, I'm trying to connect the past, present, and future.
I know this is very hard for you to probably reflect on, but partly due to the fact is when you're finishing a book, it all seems to blur together, right? But when you saw the final project put together, all the interviews put in, portraits, the images, and everything, you said there's over 400 pages, right?
No, right now we're at 304. It won't be many more.
304.
It might be 300. It will maybe 22, but I think we are aiming for 304 pages.
Yeah. It, like when you think about that whole process and you look at the final thing, the final object that it is, the book, what are you the most proud of? What makes you feel good about the final product?
Well, I think,
You know what I'm asking?
yeah. I mean, I'm just proud of. There's still a few weeks to go.
Yeah,
I will have hopefully made it soon, because of just so
you're gonna make it.
it's so much work. The most work intense part is really the interviews.
Yeah,
Because I see myself more as a visual person, but summarizing all the interviews was a lot of work. And then you have to receive permission from the interviewees if your draft is okay or if they want to make changes. And now fitting all the interviews into the design. And there are a few interviews that where we have to shorten them slightly so that they fit on a double page spread. Like this is, I don't know, this is adding more labor. And then getting images from the archives. And if it was only images, would be easier, but I think then it would be less interesting. And then I'm very grateful also to my team. So the graphic designer Kai Bachmann is amazing. Also Sarah Alberti, she writes has written the essay, which I think is an excellent essay. She's also given me a lot of feedback, and Christoph Tamad has written the foreword or the preface, and Heidi Stecker is doing the German copy editing, and Alta Price is translating the book right now from German into English. She will also do the final copy editing. So I'm very grateful to have met for everybody's support and their amazing work, but then also just to have met these people through the process.
that's wonderful.
And what I also really enjoyed was to talk about how we grew up, how we experienced the war or reunification. And most of my team is from Leipzig, so I'm from here, and or like the former grew up near Bremerhaven, just to have the team that how to put it. Well, I think just the exchange of our upbringing and the current situation, how we see things. I think that is very valuable.
Yeah, it's probably really, when you spend that much time talking to people and getting all those perspectives, it's like it can almost feel like a kaleidoscope,
Yeah. And because also, and I've just learned so much from them. So I'm
exactly.
grateful.
Yeah, it kind of colors in everything, and it kind of paints a fuller picture. And I think that's what you aim to do with the book. So I would encourage everybody, I'm going to have the link down below in the comments for the book, or for the for the campaign, and maybe a little later, when the book is for sale, we'll also put links to that after that campaign is over, because I'm sure this is going to last longer than the campaign is. So we're going to have links to all of that in the comments. So look for that.
Well, I mean, the book can be purchased through bookstores afterwards.
Well, we're going to include links to all of that wherever we can find it. Maybe you can give some suggestions when it's time of where you would encourage people to go to buy it. But I only have one last question for you, and then we can wrap up. Mm-hmm. It's the one question I ask everybody, and it's really kind of it's kind of a reflective question that's kind of there to kind of serve as advice for photographers. And I always ask this, and it's twofold. You can either answer both, you can answer just one of them, or whatever. But the first question is what kind of advice would you give to up and coming photographers? I'm sure you, as a teacher, you probably have a lot. But what kind of advice would you give to people out there that want to be an artist, or they want to take their photography into an art practice? Or my second question, because some people hate that question. They just, I don't want to give advice. I'm like, okay. So I often then kind of rephrase it, and I say, well, if you were to meet your younger self years before all this stuff happened to you, what would you tell yourself? What would you tell your younger self? And so you can take both, just take one. It's up to you.
I'll answer the first question first. So I highly recommend to stick to your intuition. So really do what you feel strongly about, because you will receive so much feedback. And I mean, I have received a lot of feedback too, and people at times wanted to push me in a different direction, but I didn't feel it was right. So just to be true to yourself, I think that's the most important part. And also don't follow any trends just because you feel you may receive more attention through that.
It's so
that's what I think.
Yeah, trends, you kind of blend in to the background. You don't really find any true.
And I
That's
think,
awesome.
No, and I think it's also important just to focus, on your work long term, right? You should have a long term perspective.
Yeah. Absolutely. Did you want to take the second one?
So wait, the second one was what I would.
What would you tell your younger self? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would say again, just follow your gut, believe it yourself, and it will somehow turn out the way it's supposed to.
Yeah. It's that intuition. You keep pointing back to it. Follow that thing that tells you it's the right way, and whatever that may be. And I like that too. When you take a long view, you're not dictated by the winds that often change. You're kind of always have a North Star. You have that kind of cardinal direction to follow. I like that. And even you would tell your younger self the same thing, which I think is amazing. So that's great. Well, I think we're at the end here. So how can people connect with you? You can share your website. If you have an Instagram, we can connect with you on Instagram.
Sure.
How can people get connected with you and follow what you do?
So through my website, I can send you the link, right? GescheWürfel.com.
Yeah.
And otherwise through Instagram, which I can share my handle with you. I have also signed up to Blue Sky, but I haven't used it very much. I am still on Facebook, but I will leave Facebook soon.
Yeah.
And yes, I think the website or Instagram right now is the best.
Perfect. Well, all right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was great. Thank you for coming. I'm glad we finally got to do this, and I got to ask all these great questions. So thank you for coming on.
No, thank you so much for the invitation and the great conversation. So I'm grateful to be here. Thank you.
Perfect. To all those that have made it this far, thank you so much for joining us on the Urbanaut Podcast. If you like content like this, I highly recommend you like, share, or comment below. All of that helps us with the algorithm. You would not believe how far a like goes in this algorithmic world we call YouTube and Spotify and all of that. So please like, share, comment, do all of that stuff. That supports our show in a really, really meaningful way. The other way you can support us too is if you want to take that a little deeper, is you can join us on Patreon. Also, you can become a paid subscriber on Spotify or YouTube. All of that helps support the show and helps us keep going. And as always, we'll see you next time.